In Chapter 11, we looked at dramatic roles and the different kinds of drama that there are. If you recall, we learned that there are three basic types of drama. There are tragedies, there are social dramas, and there are melodramas. Well, in this chapter, we're going to begin looking at comic roles in the place of comedy. Okay? Now, it's a saying in theater that it's a tragedy when you fall down the stairs, but it's a comedy when someone else does. It's not that we enjoy seeing others suffer, it's that we know how to laugh at ourselves after it stops hurting. Good comedy requires perspective. The comic actor presents a character's misfortune while providing just enough emotional distance to let us laugh. It's a juggling act, but when it works, it's magic. Comedy is a lot of fun. It's a little challenging to do because you have to have the right timing, and people have different ideas about what is funny. In fact, that takes us on to the next section of our book here. It says, what's so funny? No two people have funny bones in the exact same spot. In other words, things that I find amusing, you might not find amusing. Things that you find amusing, I might not find amusing. That's just the way we're made, okay? And so that's one of the reasons why comedy is challenging to do, because it's hard to find something that everybody finds funny. But there are three general categories of comedy that we're going to look at, and within those general categories you will see several subcategories of drama as well. Now, the kind of comedy that most people seem to like, or at least one of the two that's the most popular, would be low comedy, often sometimes called lowbrow comedy. It is usually a physical type comedy. In other words, there's a lot of physical things that are done to make people laugh. I think of the Three Stooges or something like that, where they actually do things physically that are funny. Okay, it is sometimes vulgar, which would mean not very appropriate. It sometimes includes outlandish, exaggerated forms of humor, and two of the subcategories of low comedy are farce and burlesque. Both farce and burlesque use oddly harmless violence. I think of the Three Stooges, for instance. Three Stooges is a farce because it stretches common plots to the very edge of believability through exaggeration and surprise. You know, the things that happen on the Three Stooges are things that could not happen in real life or would not happen in real life. And it has that oddly harmless violence that we talked about. I mean, if you get hit in the head with a sledgehammer, you're not going to survive that. But in the Three Stooges, they walk away like nothing ever happened. So, you know, it's just that type of comedy. It's a low comedy. It's a farce. A burlesque is similar to a farce, but it is something that it has a lot of exaggeration as well. It's on the edge of believability, but it directs its humor at a person, a custom, an artifact, or an event. Okay? And a type of burlesque would be a travesty. A travesty is something that is, again, exaggerated, may have oddly harmless violence, etc. But a travesty pokes fun at a respected subject, something such as religion or whatever. You know, if you watch South Park, and I've only seen a couple of episodes in my entire life, but just a couple of episodes of South Park that I've seen, it, in a lot of ways, fits in several of these types of some of these low comedies, but it also can fit into some high comedy, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But for instance, it is often a travesty because it will poke fun at religion and subjects that are generally respected subjects. That would make it a travesty. And it also might be a burlesque, making fun of people, customs, artifacts, and things that are not necessarily a respected subject. Now, another type of low comedy is a parody. A parody is when you imitate some other artwork in a humorous way. I think of the movie called Scary Movie. Most of you probably have seen that. But what it does is it takes movies that are truly horror movies like Scream or I Know What You Did Last Summer, and it makes fun of those. It imitates those movies, but in a humorous way. In music, a very well-known parody artist is a man named Weird Al Yankovic. I think he basically goes by Weird Al. And what he does is he takes popular songs and then he rewrites the lyrics and imitates them in a humorous way. So for instance, when Michael Jackson had his famous song Beat It, Weird Al came out with a song called Eat It. When there was a song that came out known as Riding Dirty, he came out with a song, a parody of it called White and Nerdy. So that's what a parody does. Now, it says here in the book that the loftier the subject, the more likely it will become a target for burlesque. Burlesque And farcical characters tend to be fairly extreme in their appearance, their movements, their reactions, but they often don't think they're being funny, but their circumstances and habits are laughable. Okay? Another very popular type of comedy is middlebrow comedy. Okay? Middlebrow includes more plot-based comedies, sentimental genres such as romantic comedies, situation comedies, sentimental comedies. Basically, any Sandra Bullock movie would be a romantic comedy. I would think that any of the comedies that Matthew McConaughey are in would probably be in the middlebrow comedy, either a romantic comedy or a situation comedy or something like that. These genres may provoke chuckles and smiles, but they encourage weeping and other emotional responses. A lot of the TV comedies are in this category. Okay, characters in these comedies are more realistic, though their situations and responses can still be quite broad. In a low comedy, it's going to probably be exaggerated, whereas in a middlebrow comedy, the situations are generally pretty realistic in what they do. Now, high comedy is not as popular as the other two, but in a high comedy, you have two different subcategories: satire and comedy of manners. Satire makes fun of individual people and their follies in an attempt to change their foolish behavior. So they would do, well, here's an example. King of the Hill, it's a cartoon on TV. I'm not sure they're still making new ones, but anyway, it could be considered a satire. And you also have to keep in mind some of these movies and TV shows and plays and things may be able to fit in more than one category depending on which part of the play or the story you're talking about. But it could be put into the satire category because it's making fun of a particular type of people and certain customs and the way things are done. And I'm assuming it's an attempt to change their foolish behavior, help them to see that what they do may be dumb and maybe they need to make better choices. Then you also have a comedy of manners. A comedy of manners is directed at wealthy people and their pretentiousness. Pretentiousness means the way they tend to be stuck up. Okay? Now, the thing you have to keep in mind is in whatever type of comedy it is, whether it's low, middlebrow, or high comedy, there's one thing that all comic actors have in common: commitment. No matter how ridiculous their situation, they take their acting seriously. And so that's the important thing to know, is whatever they're doing, they take their acting seriously. Think about Jim Carrey for a moment. He does some outlandish and hilarious things in his movies, and they're pretty funny. Some of them would be middlebrow comedy, some of them would be low comedy. But he's very serious in what he does, and he takes his acting very seriously. Now, as we move into studying the different types of comedies, the different parts of comedies, I should say, there's one rule you need to keep in mind. It's the rule of three, and this is very important in comedies. Okay, it's like this: if pratfalls, accidents, misunderstandings, and similar shticks are funny only 3 times in a row. In other words, when you do something kind of stupid to make people laugh, that's funny, and it's funny 3 times in a row. But that 4th time, it falls flat, and nobody knows exactly why. That's just the way it is. The only possible exception is the rule of 3 times 3. You do it 3 times in a row, you wait a while. Do it 3 more times in a row, wait a while. Do it 3 more times in a row, and then that 4th time after that 3rd time would be funny. Okay, so that sometimes is not expected, so that's what makes that funny. So how does a comedic actor engage the audience? Obviously, drama and comedy have some things in common. However, some necessary techniques are particular to comedy. A comic writer and performer must engage an audience in the comic character, employing at least some of the elements below. Okay, so here are some things that if you are doing a comedy, you need to keep in mind. First thing, be sure that your audience identifies with your character. One of the things that makes things funny to a person is because the person can identify it. There's a commercial on TV, and it's I think it's a Geico commercial or something like that. But anyway, it's where they're doing a take on the "Whoop, There It Is" song from the 1990s, but it's got ice cream that says "Scoop, There It Is," and those people are dancing and all that. I find that hilarious. I find that hilarious because I identify with those people. I could see myself dancing like that. So make sure your audience identifies with your character. Your audience should feel that it knows something your character doesn't. I don't know if you've ever seen any movies with Mr. Bean in them. He's hilarious in my opinion, and he's just really stupid, and you always know something he doesn't know. So your audience should feel like they know something you don't. The audience should feel superior to your character. In other words, like they're just a little bit above whatever it is you're doing. Something very important in comedy acting is throw in the unexpected just when the audience is least expecting it. You might also want to invert the logic of a situation by doing what seems illogical. In other words, do something that doesn't make sense, that wouldn't make sense in a normal situation. So two enemies might hug in the middle of an argument. Something else you can do is juxtapose or put together two opposite things to heighten confusion. You could pair a short, fat person with a tall, thin one, or create a character who loves kittens but is full of rage. I think of the Austin Powers movies and how he had his cat that had no hair, and yet he was wanting to blow up the world, but he loved that cat. You use rapid-fire dialogue and movement. That is very important in comedy. As you keep that comedy moving, that dialogue moving, it's very important to do that. Remember the rule of 3. Now, something you always have to keep in mind when you are performing a comedy, especially if your comedy is in front of a live audience, you must remember to hold for laughs. That means that when you say or do something that causes your audience to laugh, you pause before you say your next line. You wait until the laughter has hit a peak and then starts to decline. Once it starts to decline, then you carry on with your next line. If you fail to pause or hold for laughs, then your audience will not hear your next line or two because they are laughing. You also don't want to wait till the laughter stops completely because then it causes your comedy to drag. So you just kind of freeze in character and you let that laughter hit the peak and then begin to decline, and then you can carry on with your next line, and that will help you with what you need to do to keep your audience interested and laughing. Now, one last thing. I think it's one last thing. Let me check. Yep, that's going to be it. In this blue box right here, how to deal with the giggles. Sometimes when you're doing comedy acting, it's hard not to break out laughing in the middle of your skit. And so that's hard to deal with, and something you need to do. So here are ways you can do it. If you remain focused, you will not get the giggles during a comic performance. But momentary lapses happen to everyone. If you watch live performances, even with very veteran and seasoned actors, they often will laugh when they shouldn't laugh because something's funny. If it happens to you, bring yourself back into your character using any of these methods. Tell yourself the situation is laughable. Let your character be overtaken by disbelief. So in other words, let that be a part of it. As the character, tell yourself and communicate by your actions or gestures that you simply cannot believe the circumstances. If you must, repeat them to yourself in order to bring your character's situation back to the center of your awareness, or turn your laughter into a character trait. Become a character who laughs, cries, and reacts uncontrollably. All right, please let me know if you have any questions. Make sure that you have done the vocabulary terms right here from page 124 and turn those in for a grade, and then be paying attention in Google Classroom for what project you will do. Hope you have a good day.